This is a video describing some important aspects of how to work with video successfully in Decentraland scenes. There's three general areas that I'm going to cover in this video today. One of them is how to properly compress videos so that they work well in Decentraland. If they're not compressed at least this much, you're going to get halts and freezes and jittery stuff happening in the video, at least some of the time. And so these settings are quite adequate to give you good looking video in Decentraland, but compress the video enough that it runs smoothly. So the output of what you want to have is a MP4 file with 1280 by 720 typically. That would be a 16 by 9 kind of a high definition aspect ratio. Many videos you get will be much broader, like maybe a 1920 by 1080, and they do not need to be that many pixels to look good in Decentraland. 1280 by 720 is just fine. The encoding has to be, the compression encoding has to be .2 .h264 encoding. There are other encodings, but they may not work in Decentraland, but this one works great. And 800 kilobits per second compression on the video. More than that, you're going to have problems. Less than that, it's going to start to degrade in appearance. But at 800 kilobits per second and 1280 by 720 with this H264 encoding, it'll look just fine. It'll look good. If the in the compression process, you might as well use the original video's frame rate rather than changing it. And the audio really needs to be, the format is called AAC. And typically you're going to end up with, you're starting with a video that's either going to probably have 44.1 kilohertz or 48K kilohertz audio, stereo. That's very typical. That's fine to leave it at that and to use that. So, but it has to be AAC to work well in Decentraland. The tool that I recommend for doing this compression is the Videoland tool called VLC. You can get it for free on the internet. And then the second aspect of this work is to convert the MP4 file to an M3U8 playlist and a whole bunch of little TS video files. This is an optional step. For small videos, you probably don't need to do this, but for longer videos, 20, 30 minutes or longer, probably, certainly if it's an hour or more, you're going to want to do this second step and convert it to a bunch of small video segments controlled and managed by an M3U8 playlist. That is how broadcast streams work. It's how like YouTube videos and sources like that do it. They don't try to download the entire file to you before starting to play it. They'll stream it to you using this format. That makes it load quickly. And the tool that you can use, and it's a free tool that you can get on the internet, is called ffmpeg. It's a command line tool. It runs in Linux. I don't think it runs in Windows, but you can install a Windows Linux shell on your Windows machine. WLS it's called. And in that, then you can use something like Homebrew to get ffmpeg installed. And that Windows Linux shell can see your file system, so you can go get the files and work with them from within that Linux shell. And then finally, I'm going to show and talk about some options for where to store your video in the cloud. The options I have used are S3 spaces. I use the ones at DigitalOcean because I like their economics, but it's Amazon AWS that invented that standard. Or for a while, and sometimes I use a JavaScript server using the Node Media server. It's an npm package that you just build a configuration file on top of it, and the whole thing just works. There's some particular requirements for that. I'll talk about those. It's also possible to use IPFS to store video. You can either get a free account apparently through having a GitHub account, or you can purchase and rent an account. But in any of these formats, it's really important that you use both HTTPS and CORS headers in delivering the video from the storage to the Decentraland scene. I'm going to start with bringing up VLC, which you can get online for free. I'm on the web for free. And I'm going to do a media conversion. Let's see, that is convert save file. It's a media convert save. And I'm going to add a video that I want to convert, and it's in my downloads directory. And it is this largest file here, which currently has a bandwidth of 925 kilobits. It's only a little too big. And then the audio is 48K. It's worth noting. The audio data rate is 131 kilobits. It's kind of an unusual rate, but it's okay. So what I'm going to do is say, yep, that's okay. That's the one I want to do. I'm going to open that one in here, and then I'm going to pull this down here and pick convert. It's the convert menu on the convert menu. It's kind of funny. This is the source. We've already picked that. I want to convert, and then there's all these profiles. And I've made some of these. Some of them come with, but I've made some. And the one that I'm going to use is the one that uses H.264 compression to an MP4 file, 1280 by 70, 720, 800 kilobits per second, and then the audio is going to be AAC at 48K, so the data rate isn't going to change. But I'm going to actually drop the audio to 102 kilobits per second. I think maybe I'll change that to 128 kilobits per second. So I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to pick that, and then I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to change the, okay, so starting with, if you're setting one up, definitely when you want to have the MP4 for the video, for the encapsulation. That's the type of file that wraps the data. And then you definitely want to turn on the video encoding. And if you say keep the original video track, you get the same one without any re-encoding. If you turn that off, you get a black screen. So I'll turn it on, and it's important that you pick H.264. 265 is more modern, but it doesn't seem to work in Decentraland yet. Bit rate for the video is 800 kilobits per second. Runs pretty smoothly in Decentraland. Higher bit rates can be jerky or freeze even. Quality, I don't do anything there. Frame rate, I always use same as source. So if somebody gives me a 30 or a 25 or even a 12 frame per second or something, I don't see any reason to be messing with that. And then on resolution, you can pick one of these three things. And I always say, well, what I really want to do is I want it to have it to be 720 pixels tall. If it's a different width than 1280 as a result, because maybe it's not 16 by 9 aspect ratio, well, you're going to get a little different width, and it's probably going to stretch on the screen. So if you have a video that's not 16 by 9, I recommend that you put it into some tool like maybe Premiere Elements or something like that and letterbox it. Put a black frame behind it. It is that size, and fit the video into that frame. But any one of these three things will set it. You don't need to touch all three. I just use the vertical. And I don't use any filters on the video. On the audio, it's really important that you turn on the audio or you won't get any. It's also really important that you use the AAC, MPEG-4 AAC. The other audio streams don't seem to either work correctly in VLC or they don't work correctly in Decentraland. This is the one that works. Bit rate, I think I'm going to change this to 128. It's a good, nice number, and it will work. 2 channels. The original audio was 48K. If it's 44.1, you could change this to 44.1 so that you're not messing with the sample rate. But it was 48K, so I'm going to leave that. I'm not putting any subtitles on it. And I think that's all I need to do anything about. So I'm saving this, and it's now incorrectly labeled 102. I don't know how to change the name readily. See, maybe if I I have to create a new one. So I'm going to leave it there. It says 102, but it's really 128. Worry about that some other time. This is where you create a new one, by the way, using all the guidance that I just put. And you want to convert. You don't need to dump the raw output. Now, when you're doing one file, you can do multiple files. When you do multiple files, you can tell it gets you another option here to put the word converted on the end of the file name, underscore converted or something like that. But with a single file, and it goes in the same place as the originals. But when you are doing a single file, you get to say where you want it and what you want it to call. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in my downloads, but I'm going to call it tier 2 underscore 800 kbps. And I'm going to not have any spaces. I'm going to put an underscore there too. That looks good. So I'm going to start it going, and it's an hour video. You can see this going faster than real time, but still this is going to take a while. So I'm going to pause the recording for now, and I'll come back to you when it is finished. Okay, so it took not quite a full hour, but I think, and I've been doing some other things, but it slowed down a few times to about real time. I noticed maybe some stuff that was harder to compress, but then it sped up to maybe 2 to 3 times real time. But anyway, so when it finishes, the slider just disappears and you're back to this. So since I put it in the same directory as where I started from, in the downloads directory, if I just open up Windows Explorer to downloads, I now see that it's here. And it is about half the size. Interesting. It compressed deeper than I would have guessed, given how much, only a little bit of reduction. Maybe it's about right. But anyway, so if I double click on it, I see
This is Nice Guyman, head of the Federal Bureau
which is actually correct for this. It's a joke here. But anyway, it seems to be it plays. So now that we have our video, we're going to move on to showing the second step, which is how to use ffmpeg to optionally turn it into a M3U8 playlist, which plays a little more reliably. It starts up cleaner and faster in Decentraland, especially for larger files. So the first thing is that we need to get the tool. The tool is called ffmpeg or MPEG, and you can get it from ffmpeg.org. And I guess if you go back to the plain old thing here, you're just going to hit download here, and that's how you get to this page. And for example, if you're using Windows, it says here's a couple repositories you can get it from, and what you'll download here is executable for loading it, for installing it. In my notes say that I usually actually, as a developer, I use Chocolatey sometimes to install things. And my notes say that I usually install it using Chocolatey, which means installing an individual version of Chocolatey according to these instructions, and then using the Chocolatey tool to install ffmpeg. But you don't have to do that. You can also just use it from here. So the point is that when you have a installation, it's a command line tool that you're going to use like Windows CMD to run it. And this would be a typical command line call to ffmpeg. And this is a string that I store in my records of how to use ffmpeg. And you substitute the name of the source file here and the name of the M3U8 that you want here. And it seems to work best if you run this in the directory where this exists, probably by itself. So you create a working directory that's just has this file in it. You run it and you run this there, and it creates an M3U8 file there and a whole slew of TS files, .ts, which does not stand for TypeScript, but something like I don't know, something stream probably. And so let's do that. I'm going to bring up the place where these files live, which is here, and they're in my downloads directory. And I'm going to create a new directory here called this movie's called Theater 2, so I'm going to call it Theater 2. I'll just go just for my reference, this is M3U8 is where I'm making the M3U8 file set. And I'm going to take this file that I compressed down to 800 kilobits per second and place it here in that directory. So now it's the only thing here. And I'm going to open up this directory in the command line, which is here. And I'll see, yep, it's there. And so now I'm going to come back to this string that I have here. And the name of my file is theater2, etc., up to the .mp4. I'm going to go back over here and substitute that there in the string like that. And again here like that. And now if I run this as a command in this directory, it's going to ingest this file and produce this file and all of its subsidiary bits of video that are in the M3U8 is a playlist format. It's used both with audio and video playlists, but it's also the format that's often used to receive a stream from the cloud, especially if that stream is very large or it's just ongoing like a broadcast. It'll send you this, and then it'll keep updating inside this the list of bits of the stream to keep pulling down, and it glues them together properly, and you don't ever hear the breaks. But anyway, so I'm going to take this string and Control C, and I'm going to right click here, which will put it there, and hit return. And a bunch of stuff streams out on the screen, and then you see it starting to produce all the .ts files. And this is going to go on for quite a while. It's an hour-long video, and so once again, I'll come back when it's time to do the next step. Okay, so it finally finished and produced all these files. If I do a directory here, you'll see there's a whole bunch of them, right? A whole bunch of these TS files. And they last just maybe 10 seconds each or something like that. No, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. I'm not sure that Explorer will tell you their length or anything about them as a video file. Oh, it seems to know that they're video. So it says that the duration is 7 seconds. I'm not sure they're all 7 seconds, but let's just see if that seems to be typical. 14 seconds. I'm not sure exactly what the logic is of how much it puts in each one, but there is some logic I see. So anyway, here's the original MP4 file, and here's the M3U8 file. If I just double click on that, my VLC seems to know that.
San Sequestro residents.
My VLC file seems to be set up to know how to play M3UH just by clicking on them like that. And so maybe I can mute this a little bit here somewhere as the volume is here.
Attention, San Sequestro residents. This is Nice Guyman.
So this video
Bureau
plays nice and smoothly. Clearly we're going beyond 7 or
content
14 or something seconds here.
For subversive.
And although this is actually being played from a lot of little pieces, you wouldn't know it. But what's nice is those pieces load very quickly over the web to, or over the internet to a Decentraland scene. As opposed to, if you go back to the original here, it is this is the compressed one, 800 kilobits per second, but it still is 250 megabytes, which is going to take a long time to download, maybe half a minute or something. It depends, but it's going to be too long. It won't start right away. The video won't start right away like it would if you just play this, because it's just going to grab the first segment and start playing it. So it's a nicer way to deliver video to a Decentraland scene. All right, so the next step is that you're going to have to come up with a place to store the video files in the cloud somewhere, and then refer to their cloud URL in your video component in your scene. Here are the 3 ways that I'm aware of that they can be stored. One is what's called an S3 space. That's an Amazon AWS functionality. It just acts like a file server on the cloud. DigitalOcean is where I do most of my cloud services, and they support a S3 space that's compatible with AWS. To put things up into an S3 space, the easiest way to do it when you have a lot of files to do is to, believe it or not, to create a Unix like Ubuntu shell on your Windows PC. And here's an example of that, where I have, as you can see, I've used a cd command to change to a point in the Unix environment that's running on my machine that it constitutes my downloads directory, which is /mnt/c, and then users c for Able, downloads, theater, etc. And in that directory, I see all my files. And then there, if you install the tool there that you can install in Linux called S3CMD, S3 command. It has various command lines for operating things, including a line like this that says put everything up from a certain directory and its subdirectories into from the current directory into a destination directory in the S3 file system. I initially installed WSL and Ubuntu 2004 on my machine as a Unix shell or Linux shell on my machine. And then I use something called Homebrew to install S3CMD. And this documentation on how to use the DigitalOcean S3 space at DigitalOcean's documentation is very good. And so I've stored for myself just an example of a typical command. And so I could use this to push this up into my S3 space if I wanted to store this file there. Another possibility, besides using an S3 space, is to run a little Linux server somewhere with a virtual private server, such as at DigitalOcean, and build a Node Media Server implementation there. Node Media Server is an NPM package that has all the stuff you need to do all kinds of stuff with media services. But what's important is that you can create a configuration file. I've called it on. This is one that I've used for some time in DigitalOcean. Nowadays I'm using the S3 space more, but uh, there's a configuration file that you have at the top of your main file, and in your package you have done uh, a dependency for the Node Media Service, an npm package. So if you're familiar with writing JavaScript server side, what's really important to have in the HTTP section is this thing that sets up the CORS headers. So let me just say that in any of these three methods or any other method, it's essential that the space delivers its contents to the scene with a HTTPS in an HTTPS stream, and that the stream contains what's called CORS headers. Let me write that out: CORS headers. That is cross-origin resource something. It gives permissions. It's a negotiation between a website, and which Decentraland is a website, between a website and a service that says the website is going to use a URL that is not its own domain. It's not going to be decentraland.org. It's going to be this S3 site or Node Media Server or whatever. And normally browsers, for security reasons or intellectual property reasons, don't allow a website to pull in resources from some other website because they may not have permission to do that. So the other website, in other words, these services, can say, you know, it's okay for somebody else to use this. And they do that by enabling CORS headers in the service so that somebody else can use stuff from there. That's the way it works. And Decentraland deployed scenes have to do that. You won't have this problem when you're running the SDK, and then when you deploy the thing, you're going to see CORS headers issues if you look at the console when you run it, and if you're looking with debug turned on. It's kind of subtle. Otherwise, the video won't show up. So it's very important that wherever you're storing your videos, that they provide CORS headers when they're handing out the video. So the way you do that on DigitalOcean S3 is in DigitalOcean with an S3 space, you go to settings and you go to the CORS configurations here and you enable a wildcard. If I open this up and go edit, you'll see the origin is wildcard, so a star, an asterisk, and forget. So those are the two. This is the settings you want to use at a DigitalOcean S3 space. In a Node Media Server, you'd want to have this line here in the HTTP section. And if you're using IPFS, which does work, you just need to make sure that you're using an installation of it or an instance of it that enables CORS headers, or that you can turn that on. Once you do that, then you can use the URL to that destination, whatever it is. Each of these would have a different kind of URL to specify the video content to put into your video device in the Decentraland scene, and that's it.